Kum Len and Ablat Gemara. Today's daf is daf Pei Gimel Amid Aleph, and we're having a discussion about androgynous, if he's definitely a male or if it's a suffix a male. And we had Rabbi Yossi that says in androgynous, you're in the Tanakhama that if you have relations, a male has relations, it's chayiv for mishkav zoch as if he's a male. So we're up to here in the Gemara, and then regarding Rabbi Yossi, we had two opinions of Rice and Mishnah. One says that he's definitely androgynous, one says that's suffix. So we're up to the Gemara here by 8 lines on the top of the page, 10 lines on the top of the page. Amri Beirav. The last one line is Amri. Amri Beirav. The yeshiva of Rav said. Now the Gemara in at the end of the first parak tells us all of these things when it says the yeshiva, this and that, the old man, who we're talking about. Usually when it says Amri Beirav, it's Rav Hamnuna. But our Gemara here, where Rashi learns, is going to inform us, and Taisa agrees, that really Amri Beirav is Rav Huna. But when Rav Huna says Amri Beirav, then he's referring to Rav Hamnuna. Okay, so Rashi says later on. Amri Beirav. The Yeshiva Rav said, Rav, two things. Halacha ke Rabbi Yossi b'androgynous, but comes to androgynous halacha Rabbi Yossi that only if it's on a male, if he has relations with androgynous in the male genitalia, then it's he's chayiv mishkav zoch. But on the female, because remember androgynous has both simonim, then you're not chayiv. That's number one. And also in the laws of harkava, which is grafting, as we'll see in a minute. Shmuel goes on, and he says two more places, the halacha Rabbi Yossi, and the question is whether two more or two instead, as the Gemara will discuss. The kushi, if a woman gives birth with difficulty and she bleeds beforehand, we'll come to it and soon explain what's going on. And kiddush, she can go ahead and make climb on someone else's property. Let's go through all of them. Androgynous hadam, we just said what the case of androgynous is. Harkava, what do you call it? Harkava. What's this case of Harkava? Now we learned. The law is that 30 days before Shemitah already, we learned B'chodesh v'katzim Rishon, B'chodesh v'katzim Tishba, that the year of Shemitah doesn't begin Rosh Hashanah, it begins 30 days before. You have to be toisos, you have to add. And then it takes a short time for the roots, for it to take root. So there's a certain period that you have to plant before Rosh Hashanah in order to say it wasn't planted in the year of Shemitah. So we have to include the 30 days, plus include whatever the days it takes to take root. So we have three opinions here. Ain't noiti, you're not allowed to plant. Ain't mavrich, you're not allowed to go ahead and bend over a tree, into the ground to grow. But ain't makiv, you're not allowed to graft at a tree. If you're grafting, and just like planting at a tree before Shemitah, pachas mishloishim yoim lifnei Rosh Hashanah. When it says lifnei Rosh Hashanah, it doesn't mean literally before Rosh Hashanah. It means 30 days before Rosh Hashanah. And you have to add another 30 days, because it takes 30 days for it to take root. The imnata, the hivrich, the hirkiv, if you did it within 60 days, that means you planted a Shemitah yakor, you have to completely uproot it. Rabbi Yehuda says, no, it doesn't take so long to uproot, to take root. On the contrary, kol harkava, she'eina keletas b'shleishim, tzachakol takes 3 days to take root. If it doesn't take root within 3 days, truveni keletas, you're wasting your time. Just a seed sitting over there. And Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Shimon say shtei shabbos, 2 weeks. That means you need 30 days and 2 weeks before Rosh Hashanah of the 7th year that you have to plant. And the Omar Avon, the Gemara explains what I just said. It doesn't mean 30 days, it means 30 plus 30. 30 take root, 30 because of Taisus. With the Cephas, 3 days, 33 days, and 2 weeks, 2 weeks and 2 weeks, 2 weeks in a month. And this is and Rav's and Amri Beirav, but the halacha here is like Rabbi Yossi. And the halacha is like Rabbi Yossi b'androgynous, not like Rav on top of the page that said we dismissed the Mishnah because of the Brisa. This Rav disagrees with that and says, no, the halacha is like the Mishnah. Okay, those are the two cases Rav says. Shmuel says the case of Kushi and the case of Kiddush, the halacha Rabbi Yossi. What's going on here? The case of Kushi, now we learn the din is that if a woman gives birth, after she gives birth, the first 7 days, the blood that flows, she's tummy, and then for a boy, the next 33 days, any blood that she sees is called dam tor. We'll see in the Gemara whether it has to stop and then start again, or even if it continues to flow from day 7 to day 8, is it considered tor? But regardless of that, but what happens if she saw 3 days? Remember, outside of the cycle of 11 days between day number 8 and day number 18. If she sees 3 consecutive days, she becomes a full zova. She has to separate for 7 days from her husband and have to wait for 7 clean days. So if she saw 3 days prior to giving birth, and then she gave birth, she's called a yoledes bezoiv. She gave birth, but while she was a zova. So if she continues to see blood, that blood does not become pure blood. even though during those 33 days, because she still is a zava. And in order to clean out your zava, you have to stop bleeding altogether. And she didn't. But what happens if she saw 3 consecutive days prior to giving birth, but it was with birth pangs? In other words, the blood was not part of her cycle. The blood definitely came as a result of the labor. Then we don't call it the Yeledes B'Zayif. So the question is, provided she had birth pains, if she had the birth pains and then it stopped bleeding and for a couple of days, and then she started seeing again, and definitely that's not birth pains because the baby didn't come out, then we'll say she's a Zava. So the question is, how many days before she gives birth do we say, look, if she was bleeding and it was and it was birth and it was pain with it as well, it's considered not a Yeledes B'Zayif, even if she saw for 10 days in a row. How many days? Rameir says 40 or 50 days. That far back. You can have false contractions, but it could be the real contraction. It just takes a very long time. And that very month. In other words, if we don't look at days, we look at the month. The 9th month, as soon as the 9th month begins, if she sees, then it's the result of giving birth. Even though she gave birth the 2nd day of the month, and she started to see the 8th month, 2 days before the Rosh Chodesh, those days are not considered end with pain. They're not considered part of the with birth. If she saw 3 days before and continued on the very first day of Rosh Chodesh, she had a child. It's considered Yeledes B'Zayif. It was 3 days of pain, and she had a child right afterwards in Rosh Chodesh. It doesn't matter because that was the 8th month, and the 8th month doesn't count. That's Rabbi Yehuda's view. Rabbi Yosef Shimon says, the maximum time of contractions that we allow prior to the actual birth is 2 weeks. So there the halacha of Rabbi Yossi says Shmuel. Another way, and Kiddush, what story Kiddush? Now we learned. I go ahead and my vines, they crawl on fences and anything else, so that I put them to crawling on top of your wheat, which makes it kalaya ketamid. They join together and it becomes usher, but it's your wheat and my vines, and I went ahead and did it. Do I have to pay you damages? Did your wheat become usher? How does that work? So says the Gemara, how is the Kiddush? Well, I definitely ruined your week, even though I did it, and I asked something that doesn't belong to me, and it becomes usher, plus I have to pay for damage and so on. Because the mayor holds did it me, even though I didn't physically do damage, because I just caused it, because I didn't take the grapes grew there, but because it was a direct cause, the mayor holds did it me, so you're liable. So 2 things. First of all, you create an issa, second of all, you're liable. Comes along Rabbi Yosef Shimon and say no. They say a famous rule: Ein adam oiseh davar she'eino shloi. I cannot forbid something which is not mine. I cannot come grow vines on top and then make your wheat usher. Now, very important, Teshuvos asks. So it means if I take, let's say, my milk and I put it into your meat, it's not cholov basar b'cholov because I cannot usher your thing. How's that work? So Teshuvos says the rule as follows: any avera, any isa, which is just you have to do an activity and becomes usher, then of course I can usher your thing. If I threw treif into your pot, it ruins the food there. But any iser which requires more than just activity, requires also intention. For example, climb. If let's say, climb started to grow and I saw it and I said, I'm going towards that direction, I'm going to put a fence in between the two. Even though it grew a little bit before I got there to put the fence up, I'm not liable because you need intent and you want that to grow the way it is. So anything that requires intent, then I cannot ask something for you because you didn't have any intent. I did. So that's the rule, says Teshuvos. When we say ein adam oiseh davar she'eino shloi, is only when it comes to intent. Like I'm worshiping your animal. It's your animal, and it's to do with kavanah. Bowing down alone is not the issa. It's what I was thinking when I was prostrating myself before your animal. So therefore, I cannot ask your thing. Anyway, so Rabbi Yossi says you cannot ask other things. There's no damages because no issa. And the halacha is like Rabbi Yossi. So now we want to know. So we have 2 Rav Pascal like 2 of the cases, and Shmuel Pascal like 2. What does Rav hold regarding the other 2 cases that Shmuel Pascal and Rabbi Yossi? Does Rav agree? And what does Shmuel say about the 2 cases that Rav Pascal and Rabbi Yossi? Does he agree? So Gemara says, Shmuel. So what would Shmuel hold regarding androginous? Would he hold like Amri Beirav that rules like the Mishnah, or would he hold like the Brisa? Unless the Brisa, we already learned before. Shmuel said to Rav Onan, ignore the Brisa because we have the Mishnah. Let me ask the question, doesn't Shmuel respect the opinion of a single, a lone opinion? Yes, but not when it undermines a Mishnah. So Shmuel agrees to Rav that halacha Rabbi Yossi bandreignis. Okay, what about hakava malya mashul? What would Shmuel hold when it comes to the case of hakava, which Rav said halacha is like Rabbi Yossi, that 2 weeks and 30 days. Clearly, I don't hold like Rabbi Yossi. I hold like Rabbi Yehuda that it's 30 days and 3 days for it to take root. Koishi Malim Rav. Okay, what would Rav hold in the case of Koishi? Would he hold like Shmuel, like holds like Rabbi Yossi, that we give you 2 weeks prior to giving birth, that contractions of pain is not considered a zava, but rather as a result of the birth? Malim Rav, what would Rav hold? We're not sure. What about Kiddush, Malia Marab? What would Rav hold regarding the case of Kiddush? Do we hold like Rabbi Yossi, Ein Adam, Yisudam Shloi, Omer Yisudam coming here? Let's see what Rav says. Omer Rav Huna says in the name of Rav, Ein Halacha Rabbi Yossi. Rav Huna said in the name of Rav that the halacha is not like Rabbi Yossi. Now, even though we say that that the Bei Rav is Rav Hamnuna, that's only when Rav Huna says Bei Rav, but otherwise Rav Huna is the Bei Rav. So therefore, we say clearly that the same Bei Rav, who said in the name of Rav, those 2 laws, is Rav Huna. And Rav Huna says when it comes to the case of Kiddush, we do not paskin like Rabbi Yossi. Take one further. Abai said, why are you relying on Rav Huna? What he said in the name of Osusi in a minute, why I just said that. Why are you relying on Rav Huna, what he said in the name of Rav? But we had another person who said the name of Rav differently. Didn't Rav Abda say, Rav say, Allah is like Rabbi Yossi? Amri, he said, Bei Rav. Because who's the one who said that Rav said the halach is in 2 instances like Rabbi Yossi? It was Bei Rav. And Mane, who is Bei Rav? Rav Huna. And Rav Huna says, but in this case, ain't halacha. So we're going to have to trust him implicitly. Okay, then we continue.
Sorry, can I just ask quickly, with
Sure.
Shemitah, what is the law as to exactly, is it 2 weeks and how many days before Rosh Hashanah that you're not allowed to do anything
2
with
weeks.
the plant?
Tu b'av. It also depends if it's trees or if it's a tour, but it's tu b'av.
Oh, that's right. We did that, yeah.
Yeah. So tu b'av is when they stop in the field. Yeah, trees is much earlier. Says the Gemara further. Rabbi Yehuda says in the Mishnah that a tumtum, even after you remove his skin graft over there, and you realize that he's a male, he still can't get married because he's a saris. Sounds from the Mishnah that he's definitely sterile and he cannot procreate. Says the Gemara about me, what's Rabbi Yehuda going to say? But the fact that we know the tumtum, there's a tumtum the Biri in the city of Biri, the Oiseve Abek Kursaya, that he sat there and he once sat down on this chair, that there's a special chair, design chair, to remove that skin. So it's like it's an operation. They remove the skin growth over his genitals. But and they saw he's a male. But and he gave birth to 7 kids. Very similar story we had a few days ago. Someone else asked the question to Rav. And Rabbi Yehuda Chazer al Banav Ma'ayin. It's definitely not his kids. Find out who the real father is. No, he's so convinced of his opinion that it can't be any other way. Time to learn. Rabbi Yossi says in the Braise, Rabbi Yossi, who is the son of Rabbi Yehuda, doesn't seem to agree with his father. But he said, his father clearly said that Tumtum is definitely sterile, cannot get married, nothing. Comes along, Rabbi Yossi, Tumtum lo yachlis, that a Tumtum should not give chalitza, because Shema, why not? Because we're worried, maybe he's a male, because Shema, so maybe he's a male, let him give chalitza and set it free. Because Shema, maybe it'll rip open, and maybe he'll become a sar. In other words, not 100%. Not like my father says, definitely he's a saris. Maybe a saris chama. Maybe he's what do you call it? Is a sterile. Says the Gemara, Otu sounds like from here that definitely is a male. The question is whether he's sterile or not. Otu kol hamikareya zochrav. I mean, every single tumtum is a male. This is what he meant to say. Shema yikarei. First of all, 50% chance it's a female, not a male. And he nimtu zoch, and even if it's a male, shema yimatu says chama. Maybe it's sterile. So not definite, just a maybe. So my benai, what's the difference? You say it's definitely sterile or maybe sterile. The outcome is the same, isn't it? Oh my rather, no, I'll tell you the outcome, the difference would be. The difference would be lifsal b'makam achin. Let's say there's a number of brothers besides this tumtum, and then this tumtum decides to give chalitza. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, so can the other brothers now go ahead and marry this woman or not? According to Rabbi Yehuda, says that this person is totally sterile and he has no effect, no bearing at all. Then surely he didn't ruin her regarding other brothers. And if other brothers want to marry her, they can, because nothing happened with the tumtum. However, according to Rabbi Yehuda, since it's possible that the tumtum is not sterile, could be that his chalitza is a valid chalitza, and therefore the brothers, nobody can marry her. All they have to do is give her another chalitza, but nobody can marry anymore. Because once he received the chalitza from one brother, obviously it comes us to everybody else. That's one difference. Another difference is the lachlik shalom amach. Let's say no other brothers except the tumtum. According to Rabbi Yehuda, that's it. She's a free woman. According to Rabbi Yossi, no, he still has to give chalitza because maybe he is not sterile. Shmuel, the son of Rabbi Yehuda, the son of Rababa, the brother of Rabbi Yehuda Bazavdi said, the name of Rabbi Yehuda Amarav, So the Gemara is so pedantic, and not only do we want to know what the halach is, we want to know exactly who said it. And so he said over here, which shul Rabbi Yehuda it is, the brother of Zabdi, said the name of Rabbi Yehuda, the name of Rav. And the Reginus Chayavin Alev, this is the issue we discussed before. We explained before the Tanakama and Rabbi Lezer that according to Tanakama, what do you call it? According to Tanakama, we said that whichever you have a relationship with androgynous, male or female, it is if a male has a relationship with androgynous, the male side or the female side, you get skill, and according to Rabbi Lezer, only the male side. Now we have Machlek Samurai. But the regular chayolas in both areas you get curse. Mesa has a question. Rabbi Lezer, and the regular is chayolas skill because Rabbi Lezer says that and regular is chayolas skill is like if you had a relation with a male that made Ramum is and this Bryce actually spells it out only on the male side. I will not but Rabbi Lezer says in the female side you potter. Says the Gemara. So the Gemara could have answered very simply that Rabbi Yehuda Rav follows the Tanakama Mishnah. But Tanakama is not clear. So he says, I found in the Bryce, it's clearly Rabbi Shmuel, so it says, Adregin is Chayav, is Chayiv in both places. Even though Rabbi Lezer says Taki only Chayiv in the male region, I hold like Rabbi Shmuel, clearly spells it out that they Chayiv in both. And then we take Rabbi Shmuel and we interpret the Tanakama saying the same thing. Now what's going on here? My time with Rabbi Shmuel, why should you be Chayiv if you have relations by androgynous with the female side of the androgynous? But Abdul actually explained to me, there's a pasuk. The pasuk says the following: that a zachar male you shouldn't have relations with, and it says mishkevei isha. It says in plural mishkevei, and then it refers to isha, a woman. So the mishkevei in plurals you have to know why, and isha, why do you have to know it? To Avi, it's to Avi. So before the Gemara we learned from here that a woman also, if you let's say have arayus, incest with a woman, not the normal way, but through anally, you're also liable because it says mishkavei isha. So that there's two kinds of mishkavim by a woman. So we use that to teach you regarding a woman. Now we're going to use it to teach you regarding a zachar male. It goes as follows. Hamdur explained to me, he said the pasuk zachar loy sishkev mishkavei isha ezahu zachar yedvishnei mishkavim. Which males? We're going to say now that the pasuk is actually referring to the male. Mishkavei, which zachar has two different ways of having relations with. Having is androgynous, and the pasuk is coming to include mishkavei. That androgynous both. Whichever way you have relations with him, it is forbidden. But Rabbanon, what do they say? Rabbanon, which is Rabbi Lezer, what do they say? How do they learn only one, only in the male side? What do mishkavei? As zachar. It says the pasuk as zachar, which means the male only if you're behaving with this androgynous like a zachar to a zachar. Only then are you liable, not in any other way. And this is how you read the pasuk. Only the zachar side of a person that happens to have mishkavei, a person that happens to have two different ways of having relations, but nevertheless you're only liable if you did it on the zachar side. Rabbanan zachar greda minolus. Rabbanan, what do you call it? What about? So that's always so. According to them, your whole pasuk is talking about androgynous. What about a zachar? How do you know that a zachar don't have relations at all? Maybe only androgynous not allowed to. And you're telling me the whole pasuk is talking about androgynous. Says the Gemara, zachar. How do they know a zachar on its own? So the Gemara says it says me'es isha, and because it says me'es isha, so it says me'es. By saying me'es means and also something else besides the zachar, besides androgynous is also a zachar itself. Says the Gemara, the gives here a little funny. What about before we learned Shalai Kedarka, Isha Shalai Kedarka, before we learned a woman Shalai Kedarka is from it says Mishra Isha, but now you tell me it's to do with androgynous. How do you know by a woman if it's Shalai Kedarka the unnatural way as well, and it's incest that you're liable? Because it says Isha, by saying the word it says Ve'es Isha. When it nothing to do with this pasuk here, when it says the es isha, but when it comes to androgynous, when it comes to arayos, so we'll say the es isha come tell you that also something secondary, not the normal way, not the conventional way, you're also liable. When we say that androgynous has the law of a male, not in every single respect, not in every way. What do you mean not in every way? The Gemara says. Even though in the Mishnah Rabbi Lezer says that he's a full-fledged male, not every respect a full-fledged male. Shimata can't even say that. Then it's just like if by a person will say that I'm a full-fledged male, so too when it comes to kabbanas, you're going to say that's a full-fledged male. So if so, the mukdashin yikdash. If so, when you let's say want to set aside an animal to bring as a carbon, a certain animal that like an oiler can only be a male, But when he said that Reigns is male, it does not include carbons because otherwise. If he's not in every respect, only when it comes to the laws of Mishka Zacha, because when it comes to Zacha, when it comes to the laws of the Mishnah about getting married or feeding his wife Truma. But when it comes, for example, to a carbon, you're not going to say, "Oh, it's a regulus carbon animal," and the Torah wants a male. Good enough, not so. Because the story is as follows: we know because that doesn't become holy. That's not what we learned. If an animal, when we talk about setting aside an animal for a carbon, the animal has certain requirements, certain prerequisites. Hanirba, the animal committed bestiality, or hamukta, you set aside the animal for avodah zarah, or hanever, you actually used it for avodah zarah, or esnan, you gave it to a harlot as a present, or a michir, you swapped a dog for this animal. So therefore, it's the meaning to use such an animal for a carbon to the And then the Tanakhama says, so to a tumtum, an animal that was a tumtum is all of these animals are considered karbanas. And we know when it comes to a bird, the bird is different than other animals. By a bird that's a carcass, he didn't shecht it correctly, so it becomes tummy by eating it. And the veilus oif tar, if it's a kosher bird, then the vela becomes tummy by eating it. Now I was talking about you did malika. A kohen does malika, they use the thumb, the long nail, and they go through the back instead of the normal thing. If the carbon, that's the only way it's kosher. For any other animal, I'll make it treif. Or any other bird, if it's not a carbon, it becomes treif. So what happened was you made over here, you cut it, you with your finger, so all of these become tameh because all of these were kabbanas and you did malika, and therefore they are called an avelus of tar and they become tameh. However, Rabbi says tumtum v'andregnis ain't metameh gonna basically that tumtum and andregnis will not be metameh at all. Why? Because you did not, because it's not a carbon. Whenever the Torah says Zohar, which means you need the Torah says an oil has to be Zohar. It has to be 100% Zohar, not 99% Zohar, but 100%. Or it says a certain animal like a chat is in the keva. It has to be 100% on the keva. But you cannot use a tumtum adreinis at the mighty tumtum adreinis mebenayim. You take out a tumtum adreinis cannot be used. However, an oif hoil when it was on the keva, but when it comes to a bird, since it does not say on the keva, you have to make it tumtum adreinis name. So all these other ones nearby muktzah, they're not good kabbanis. Therefore, they're nevela and they're metame. But tumtum nadregnis, he says, by a bird could be used because by a bird it doesn't say anywhere there has to be a male bird or a female bird. So by animals, you're right, it cannot be a tumtum nadregnis because Torah wants either definitely male or definitely female. But when it comes to bird, it doesn't mention bird male or female. Therefore, tumtum nadregnis can be used because they're a mixture of both a male and a female, and therefore when you did malika, it's not an avelus of Torah, and that's not metame. What does he clear from here? And when it comes to a carbon, Nadregin is not 100% male. The Nadregin is a suffix, male or female. So we see Rabbi Yeshua when he said it's a male only in certain respects, not in every other respect. Says the Gemara, we actually learned something similar, but it says you're not allowed to bring a carbon, an animal which is a mixture. He says I want a cow, I want a sheep, I want a ram, but not if it's a mixture. Then the pasuk says Kivol gave birth, but the animal was born through cesarean. You cannot bring as a carbon. Haklayim and the treif, an animal, obviously that's a treif, and it has one of the different signs of treif that it's not kosher, that's not going to live the year. He ate it, came out cesarean, and a tumtum and an adregan is like kadeshin v'lei mekachi. They themselves cannot become holy. They don't become holy. All other animals that if they don't become holy, they become what do you call it? Let's say you take an animal that was a nirba, an animal that was a nevet. We don't want to bring in the base of English, but they do become holy, and you have to wait then for it to contract some kind of a defect, and then you redeem it, and so on and so forth. And then even after you redeem it, a certain kedusha there, you're not allowed to use it for shearing, you're not allowed to work, you just go eat. But in these ones, klayim and treifa and yetzadefen and tumtum adregnish, it doesn't even become holy in the first place at all, and therefore you don't have to redeem it waiting for a mum because it never became a kedusha guf. It's only Kedusha's dummy, only the value of it. And therefore, when you redeem it, you can share the wool and avoid it. Does not become holy. Like Kedoshi does not become holy. What do you mean does not become holy? Let me catch it. Let me become holy, but Tzmura. That it doesn't become holy in the first sentence, in the first instance. Then we learned in this week's parsha that we read yesterday the idea of Tzmura. If you have a carbon and then you say I want to swap it for another one, Toy makes no difference. Good to bad, bad to good makes no difference. We don't want you to swap the kedusha of one carbon to another carbon. But if you did, the other carbon becomes holy, but you committed a sin. But in this case over here, if you had a regular carbon, then you just try to transfer the kedusha to one of these animals here, including the androgynous, it would not become kodesh at all. We're going. Then the next thing that nor if it was holy, it cannot pass on to another one. Now, what do you mean it was holy? We just said before that androgynous can never become holy. So it's talking about a case where you set the mother, an animal, a cow, you made it kodesh, and then the cow became pregnant, and it had an androgynous in there, and then therefore the androgynous becomes holy itself, and you cannot swap that kedusha for another animal. Same with treifa. You set aside an animal, became treifa afterwards. If all of these defects happen afterwards, so it became kodesh, and then after it became a defect, it remains kodesh, and then you cannot swap it for another animal. Rebbe said, interesting thing, a very interesting comment about Rebbe. Just imagine, his father was a Nasi of that generation. So this is his son, his prized son, who later became the next Nasi, and the Gemara said that there was nobody like him. He redacted the Mishnayos and so on. And look what he says, a comment about his life. Wonder how you can interpret it today. I decided I want to go learn Torah, but Rabbi Elazar ben Shemaya was a very big Talmid Chacham, so I wanted to study by him. Chavru alai talmidav, his students ganged up against me. Like roosters of the house of Bukia. Rashi says Bukia from the word Buki, that his students were unbelievably sharp and they were unbelievable experts in everything in learning, and they didn't want a new guy. They had a very strong clique, and they didn't want some stranger coming in. They did not allow me to stay there to learn Torah. Rabbi Elazar ben Shemaya. I only learned one thing before they chased me out. That the Mishnah Seinu, in our Mishnah, Rabbi Elazar says, Andregin is chayovin olos kila kazachra. Andregin is chayav kila kazachra, which means that in our Mishnah he didn't have this girsa, or the Tezyantiv had other girsas, and this is what I learned from Rabbi Elazar ben Shemaya, or he learned that from there, and then he put that in the Mishnah. So could you imagine cliques and not allowing Rebbe to come and join the class and come join the yeshiva because and he was a Nasi's son? Pretty amazing. Hadna Lacha Orel, we'll pause over here.